In a small town called Maplewood, there was a neighborhood filled with neat lawns, trimmed bushes, and colorful flowers. Most homes were part of a homeowners association, or HOA for short, that had strict rules about how things should look. People who lived there had to paint their houses a specific color and keep their yards tidy. The residents followed the rules strictly, and they often looked out for each other, which was a good thing. However, there was one person who took her role very seriously, and everyone called her Karen. Karen was indeed the self-appointed queen of a neighborhood. She walked around in her brightly colored outfits, waving at neighbors while silently judging them. She believed every inch of the neighborhood should be perfect and was quick to point out mistakes. If someone forgot to cut their grass or painted their mailbox a wrong color, Karen would knock on their door and let them know. She had a way of making people feel small, and many neighbors avoided her. One day, a new family moved into Maplewood. The Johnsons, consisting of a father named Mark, a mother named Lisa, and their curious 8-year-old son Timmy, were excited about their new home. But there was one big difference. The Johnsons had bought a house that was not part of the HOA. This house stood just outside the neighborhood, a cozy, 2-story cottage with wildflowers growing freely in the yard. They loved it just the way it was. The first morning in their new home, as Lisa was unpacking boxes and Mark was setting up their outdoor furniture, Timmy wandered outside to explore the yard. He picked a few flowers and exclaimed how beautiful they were. Just then, Karen happened to be on her morning stroll. Her eyes widened when she saw the overgrown garden. "What on earth is this?" she exclaimed, stomping towards Timmy like a thunderstorm approaching quickly. "Do you have a permit for this garden? It's all wild and messy." Timmy, surprised, looked up at her. "I'd just like the flowers," he said simply, not understanding why a flower would upset anyone. Karen took a deep breath and turned her attention to Mark and Lisa, who had heard the commotion and came outside. "I thought this neighborhood was for families who appreciate beauty and order," she said, glaring at them. "You need to get rid of these wildflowers immediately." Lisa, ever calm, smiled and replied, "We love the way our yard looks. It's just the way we want it. This is unacceptable," Karen said, her voice rising. "You can't just come into Maplewood and ruin its beauty. This is a wonderful neighborhood, and you need to follow the rules." Mark spoke up. "Actually, we're not part of the HOA. We bought this house on the other side. We just like it here." "That doesn't matter," Karen said, waving her hands furiously. "You need to leave right now if you can't respect our community. We don't want her kind ruining our neighborhood's charm." Timmy looked up at his parents, confused. Why does she care so much about our flowers? His parents knelt beside him. "Some people have strong opinions, buddy, but we love our home, and that's what's important." Just then, a couple, Sarah and Jake, walked by. They had seen the commotion and paused to listen. Sarah whispered to Jake, "Is that Karen giving him a hard time again?" "Looks like it," Jake replied, shaking his head. "That's just her way." Mark, not wanting to escalate the situation but also feeling protective of his family, said, "We'll be fine if you can just let us enjoy our home. We don't mean any harm." But Karen couldn't let it go. "Enjoy? You're ruining everything. All the neighbors will complain. You'll see." She stormed off, leaving the Johnsons feeling a little shaken but determined to stand their ground. Over the next few days, Karen became relentless. She would stop by unannounced, often demanding that they cut down their flowers or paint their house a different shade. But the Johnsons remained steadfast. They explained their love for their new home and how they intended to keep it the way they wanted. Word began to spread among the neighborhood. Some residents sided with Karen, believing she was trying to maintain order. Others were curious and began visiting the Johnsons, appreciating the wild beauty of the garden. Timmy made new friends, and they would often play in a flower-filled yard. One afternoon, Karen decided to take action. She gathered a few of her closest friends from the HOA and marched over to Johnson's house with a petition to force them to leave. They knocked loudly on the door. "We have an important matter to discuss." Karen yelled when Lisa opened the door. "Please don't knock so loud," Lisa replied gently. "Timmy is taking a nap." "We need to talk about your house and garden," Karen said, clearly not interested in Lisa's request. "We have a petition signed by most of the neighbors." You have to change everything or move out. Lisa looked shocked but still remained calm. Everyone has the right to their opinion. Karen, but we love our home. This is where we want to be. Karen frowned. This isn't just about you. It's about the community. Just then, something unexpected happened. Sarah stepped forward. Actually, I think many of us love the way the Johnsons have their home. It shows character. Jake nodded, joining in. Yeah, I think it brightens up the place. We need more flower gardens, not less. Karen looked aghast, having not expected this turn of events. She glared at Sarah and Jake, then turned to see more neighbors gathering around in support of the Johnsons. Faced with a growing crowd, Karen took a step back, her voice shaking slightly. You can't be serious. They're ruining everything. We believe in diversity, Sarah said firmly. It makes our neighborhood interesting. Let's celebrate differences instead of trying to control them. Suddenly, Karen found herself outnumbered. The neighbors began to cheer on the Johnsons for their unique approach. Karen felt the heat of embarrassment wash over her. Realizing she was losing her grip on the community she believed she controlled. Feeling defeated, Karen turned and walked away, muttering under her breath, "This isn't over." But as the days passed, the Johnsons became more settled and enjoyed their garden and new friends. Other neighbors visited often, and laughter and joy filled their once quiet yard. The Johnsons transformed their home into a happy gathering place. They threw small barbecues where neighbors would come and share stories. Slowly, even Karen began to soften, not because she had changed her views, but because the warmth of community was too strong to ignore. In the end, Karen even found herself stopping by, not to judge, but to join in. And while the Johnsons and their flowers remained a symbol of freedom, Karen learned that sometimes beauty comes in many different forms, and acceptance can create a beautiful community. Title: The Neighborly Surprise. Once upon a time, in a sunny little town called Maplewood, there was a quiet neighborhood called Willow Creek. This neighborhood was known for its beautiful parks, friendly families, and most importantly, its strict homeowners association, usually known as the HOA. The lady in charge of keeping everyone in line was Karen. Karen was the ultimate HOA president, a small woman with big opinions. She believed every home should look the same, with neat lawns and matching mailboxes. When anyone dared be different, Karen would be the first to complain. In the same town lived Jamie, an adventurous young man who had just bought a charming little house on the other side of Willow Creek. His home was old and full of character. It had a beautiful garden with colorful flowers and a big oak tree in the front yard. Jamie loved his new house, especially because it was not part of the HOA. He enjoyed the freedom to paint his mailbox the color he wanted and to plant whatever flowers made him happy. One bright Saturday morning, Jamie was busy moving boxes into his new home. He whistled a cheerful tune and felt excited to start this new chapter in his life. Soon, the sound of a car engine broke his concentration. Jamie looked up to see a shiny SUV parked across the street. Out stepped Karen, wearing her signature sun hat and carrying a clipboard. "Hello there." Karen called out in a tone that was friendly, but also slightly stern. Jamie waved back, hoping she was as welcoming as she seemed. "I'm Karen, the HOA president around here," she said, walking toward Jamie with purpose. "I see you're moving in. How lovely." "Hi, I'm Jamie," he replied, smiling. "I just moved in today." Karen's smile faded as she glanced at the colorful flowers in the garden. "Interesting choice of landscaping you have," she remarked. "Here in Willow Creek, we have guidelines to follow. I do hope you plan to keep everything neat." Jamie's excitement began to fade. "Oh, I didn't realize there were guidelines. But my house is in the HOA, so I thought I could do what I want." "That's what we call a problem," Karen said, her tone shifting. She pulled out her clipboard and began to write. "You see, the HOA doesn't just control the homes inside it. We like to keep the area looking nice for everyone, even outside our jurisdiction." "You mean I can't have my garden the way I want?" Jamie asked, surprised. "Let's just say that bright colors aren't to everyone's taste," Karen replied, not even looking up from her notes. "And that sets a bad example for the other homes around here. I have to insist you remove those flowers immediately." Jamie was taken aback. but they make me happy. I don't want to live in a neighborhood where everyone has to be the same. Karen finally looked up and stared at him with wide, disapproving eyes. You should have thought about that before moving here. I suggest you follow the rules, or I might have to ask you to leave. Leave, Jamie echoed, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. You can't do that. Oh, I can, Karen replied, her confidence shining through. The HOA has power, and I intend to use it if necessary. Jamie was upset, but he didn't want to give in. I'll think about it, but I'm not changing my flowers. I moved here for a fresh start, and I wanted to be bright and colorful. That day, Jamie spent time unpacking while Karen watched from her driveway, shaking her head. The birds chirped happily and the sun continued to shine, but Jamie could feel the tension in the air. Soon, he decided he had to meet some of his neighbors to share his worries and see how they felt about Karen's rules. Later that evening, Jamie knocked on the door of his closest neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, an elderly lady who had lived in Willow Creek for many years. She welcomed him warmly and offered him lemonade. As they chatted, Jamie mentioned Karen. Ah, yes, Karen, Mrs. Thompson said with a sigh. She means well, but she can be a bit too controlling. Most of us just try to keep her happy to avoid trouble. But what if someone wants to be different? Jamie asked, shouldn't we be able to express ourselves in our own homes? Mrs. Thompson smiled kindly. You have a good heart, Jamie. But sometimes it's easy to go along. Still, you should stand up for what you believe in. The next day, Jamie made a decision. He gathered his neighbors together for a small meeting in his yard. He invited Mrs. Thompson, the friendly family next door with a playful golden retriever, and even a young couple who had just moved in down the street. Jamie explained the situation and how Karen wanted to control his garden. Karen isn't in charge of our happiness, Jamie said passionately. We should be able to enjoy our homes how we want. To his delight, everyone nodded in agreement. They began to share stories of the times Karen had come down hard on them, making rules that felt unfair. Together, they decided to take a united stand against her. The next day, Jamie and his neighbors set up their gardens with bright flowers and decorations. They made their homes into little pieces of art. They decided to host a neighborhood barbecue that Saturday and invite everyone to join and see the happy place they had created. When Karen saw everyone's colorful gardens, her face turned red with anger. What do you think you're doing? She stormed over, clipboard in hand. We're just enjoying life, Karen, Jamie said calmly. We decided to celebrate our individuality. You can't control us. Karen huffed. You'll regret this. I'll call an emergency HOA meeting. Go ahead, Jamie replied, standing firm with his neighbors behind him. We'll be there too. That night, the neighborhood was buzzing with excitement. The barbecue brought laughter, good food, and friendship. Jamie felt a sense of community he had never experienced before. At the HOA meeting a few days later, everyone attended, including Jamie and his neighbors. They shared their stories about how Karen's rules had affected them. To everyone's surprise, many residents supported Jamie's right to decorate his home as he wished. We appreciate order, said one neighbor, but we also love our freedom. By the end of the meeting, Karen found herself outnumbered. As she walked away, Jamie felt a sense of victory. He had stood up for himself, and his neighbors had rallied together. From that day on, Willow Creek was filled with vibrant colors and joyful homes, a place where everyone could live happily and freely. Jamie knew that change doesn't always come easy, but he was glad he had fought for his colorful garden. And as for Karen, she learned that sometimes it's better to embrace the beauty of differences than to hold on too tightly to rules. In the heart of Maplewood, new friendships blossomed, and Jamie lived happily in his home, now known as the joyful, colorful gem of the neighborhood. I finally did it. After years of saving, scrimping, and dreaming, I bought my own little slice of heaven. It wasn't much, a cozy 2-bedroom bungalow with a sprawling, untamed garden, but it was mine. The best part? It was just outside the manicured lawns and watchful eyes of the dreaded Hawthorne Creek Homeowners Association. I'd specifically chosen the place because of its location. I'd heard horror stories about HOAs and their endless rules, regulations, and fines. I wanted freedom, a place where I could paint my front door purple if I wanted to, without getting a nasty letter in the mail. The moving truck lumbered down the street, loaded with my worldly possessions. I bounced with anticipation, eager to start this new chapter. As the movers began unloading boxes, a woman with a severe bob haircut and a permanent frown marched across my new lawn. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice tight with disapproval. "What do you think you're doing?" I blinked, momentarily taken aback. "I'm moving in," I replied, stating the obvious. "I just bought this house." She scoffed, her eyes scanning my truckload of belongings with disdain. "You can't. This is Hawthorne Creek. You need HOA approval before moving in." I suppressed a sigh. "Here we go. Actually," I said as calmly as I could, "this property isn't part of Hawthorne Creek. It's outside the HOA. Her face contorted in disbelief. "That's impossible. Everyone on this street is part of the HOA. "Well, not me," I said, gesturing to property line. "See that little marker? That's where Hawthorne Creek ends." I checked all the documents. I'm definitely not in the HOA. The woman's face turned a shade of red. I didn't think was humanly possible. "You can't just move in here and disrupt the community," she shrieked. "We have standards. We have rules." "I'm not disrupting anything," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "I just want to live in my house." "This is unacceptable," she sputtered. "I am Beatrice, president of the Hawthorne Creek HOA, and I demand that you leave immediately." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You demand? On what grounds?" "On the grounds that you're clearly not the type of person who belongs in Hawthorne Creek," she declared, her voice rising. "Look at you. Look at your things. This is a respectable neighborhood." I glanced down at my jeans and t-shirt, then at my things. A mix of quirky furniture, colorful artwork, and overflowing bookshelves. "I'm not sure what you mean by that," I said, my patience wearing thin. "I mean, you're not conforming," she exclaimed. "We have a certain aesthetic to maintain. You'll ruin our property values." "I think you're being ridiculous," I said, finally losing my cool. "I bought this house fair and square. I'm not breaking any laws. And I'm certainly not leaving." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that," she hissed. "You haven't seen the last of me." With that, she spun on her heel and stomped back towards her perfectly manicured lawn. I watched her go, a mix of anger and amusement swirling inside me. I had a feeling this was just the beginning. The next few days were relatively quiet. I focused on unpacking, decorating, and tried to make my new house feel like home. I met a few of my other neighbors, who were surprisingly welcoming. An elderly gentleman named Mr. Henderson, who lived on the other side of me, even brought over a plate of homemade cookies. "Don't mind Beatrice," he chuckled, winking. "She means well, but she can be a bit overzealous." I smiled. I gathered that. "Just be yourself," he advised. "Most of us are happy to have you here." His words were encouraging, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Beatrice was plotting something. I was right. A week after I moved in, I woke up to find a bright pink flamingo perched in the middle of my front lawn. Then another, and another. By the end of the day, my yard was a sea of plastic flamingos. I couldn't help but laugh. It was so absurd. I knew it was Beatrice's doing, a childish attempt to intimidate me. I decided to play along. The next day, I bought a dozen more flamingos and added them to the flock. I even dressed a few of them in tiny Hawaiian shirts and sunglasses. My lawn became a tourist attraction, with people stopping to take pictures and giggle. Beatrice was furious. I could see her glaring at me from her window, her face a mask of rage. Her tactics escalated. Anonymous complaints were filed with the city about my unsightly garden. My mailbox was stuffed with flyers advertising HOA meetings. And then came the letters. Official-looking letters from the Hawthorne Creek HOA, threatening legal action if I didn't comply with their regulations. They cited rules about lawn maintenance, house color, and even the type of flowers I was allowed to plant. I ignored them. I knew they had no jurisdiction over me. But Beatrice was relentless. One afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, Beatrice stormed over, her face flushed with anger. "I've had enough," she shrieked. You're ruining this neighborhood. You're a menace. I'm just living my life, I said, trying to remain calm. I'm not hurting anyone. You're defying us, she screamed. You're challenging our authority. Your authority doesn't extend to me, I pointed out. I'm not part of your HOA. Beatrice's eyes glazed over with rage. I won't let you get away with this, she bellowed. She grabbed a handful of dirt and flung it at me. I gasped, shocked by her audacity. Are you serious? I'll make your life a living hell, she screamed. You'll regret ever moving here. That's when I snapped. I stood up, dusted myself off, and looked Beatrice straight in the eye. You know what, Beatrice? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm done with this. I'm not going to let you bully me anymore. I took a deep breath and continued. I like my house. I like my garden. And I like my flamingos. I'm not going anywhere. So, you can either accept that and leave me alone, or you can keep harassing me and make yourself look like a complete fool. The choice is yours. Beatrice stared at me, speechless for once. She opened her mouth to say something, but then seemed to think better of it. With a final glare, she turned and stomped back to her house. I watched her go, feeling a sense of triumph wash over me. I had stood up to the HOA Karen and won. The flamingos stayed. My garden continued to thrive. And while Beatrice never quite warmed up to me, she did eventually stop harassing me. I settled into my new home, surrounded by my quirky belongings and my slightly less quirky neighbors. I learned a valuable lesson during my battle with Beatrice. Sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe in, even if it means facing the wrath of an HOA Karen. And sometimes a little bit of flamingo flair can go a long way. It was the kind of house I'd always dreamed of owning. A cozy little cottage with a sprawling garden and a view that stretched out over the rolling hills. After years of saving and countless hours spent searching, I had finally found it. The best part? It was blissfully free from the clutches of any homeowners association HOA. Sarah was ecstatic. I had heard horror stories about HOAs and their endless rules and regulations. My friend Emily once got fined for having her lawn half an inch too long. No, thank you. I was determined to live a life of freedom and paint my front door whatever color I pleased. The moving truck lumbered down the long driveway, kicking up dust as it came to a halt in front of my new home. I bounced on the balls of my feet, eager to start unpacking and settling in. My best friend Jake was already there, armed with a box cutter and a grin. Ready to turn this house into a home? He asked, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Born ready, I replied, grabbing a box labeled Kitchen Essentials. We worked tirelessly throughout the day, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, and hanging pictures. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lawn, we finally paused to admire our handiwork. The cottage felt like mine already, filled with warmth and personality. That's when I saw her. A woman was marching across my lawn, her face a mask of fury. She had the unmistakable air of someone who was used to getting her way. Her name was Deborah, but everyone called her Deb. You, she screeched, pointing a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. What do you think you're doing? I blinked, taken aback by her aggressive tone. I'm moving in, I said, stating the obvious. I just bought this house. Her eyes narrowed. This is a part of the Harmony Glade HOA, she declared, her voice dripping with disdain. You can't just move in here without our permission. I raised an eyebrow. Actually, I can, I said calmly. This property isn't part of the HOA. I checked before I bought it. Her face turned an alarming shade of red. That's impossible, she sputtered. Everyone here is part of the HOA. We have rules, regulations, and standards to maintain. Well, congratulations to you all, but this house isn't subject to any of it. I maintained my composure, though I could feel my blood starting to boil. I suggest you take a look at the property line sometime. I am the president of the HOA, and I am telling you that you need to leave immediately. You what? Is this a joke? Jake, who was standing behind me, couldn't help but interject. Mind your business, young man. Deb shot back, before turning her gaze back to me. I demand that you leave. Now, I crossed my arms, refusing to be intimidated. I'm not going anywhere. I said firmly, I own this house, and I intend to live here in peace. You'll regret this, she hissed, her eyes blazing. Will make your life miserable. With that, she turned on her heel and stomped back across the lawn, muttering threats under her breath. Jake and I exchanged bewildered glances. Well, that was eventful, he said, breaking the silence. You have no idea, I replied, shaking my head. I have a feeling this is just the beginning. And I was right. Over the next few weeks, Deb and her HOA cronies launched a full-scale assault on my peaceful existence. They started with petty annoyances, like parking their cars in front of my driveway or accidentally kicking soccer balls into my garden. Then, they escalated their tactics. They sent me a barrage of letters, claiming that my garden was unkempt, my house was the wrong color, and my trash cans were an eyesore. They even tried to fine me for having a non-approved bird feeder. I ignored their letters and refused to be drawn into their petty games. I mowed my lawn, planted flowers, and painted my front door a cheerful shade of yellow. I was determined to enjoy my new home, no matter what they threw at me. One afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, Deb stormed over my property, her face contorted with rage. She was accompanied by 2 other HOA members, both of whom looked equally unpleasant. We've had enough of your defiance, she snarled. We're here to give you one last chance to leave. If you don't, we'll take matters into our own hands. I stood up, wiping the sweat from my brow. What do you mean by that? I asked, my voice dangerously low. We'll make sure you regret ever moving here, she said, her eyes glinting with malice. We'll make your life a living hell. I had reached my breaking point. You know, I've tried to be reasonable, I said, my voice trembling with anger. But I'm done. I am not backing down. This is my home, and I will defend it. Oh, really? Deb sneered. And how do you plan to do that? I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent a shiver down her spine. Let's just say I have a few tricks up my sleeve, I replied. That night, I put my plan into action. I started by installing security cameras all around my property, making sure to capture every angle. Then, I contacted a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. She assured me that I had a strong case and that the HOA had no legal right to harass me. Next, I started documenting every single instance of harassment, from the petty annoyances to the outright threats. I took photos, recorded conversations, and kept a detailed log of every incident. Finally, I decided to fight back publicly. I started a blog detailing my experiences with the HOA and exposing their bullying tactics. I shared photos and videos of their harassment, and I encouraged other victims of HOA abuse to share their stories. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the country reached out to me, sharing their own horror stories and offering words of support. My blog went viral, and soon the local news media picked up the story. Deb and the HOA were furious. They tried to discredit me, calling me a liar and a troublemaker, but it was no use. The truth was out, and people were starting to see them for what they really were, a group of petty tyrants who were obsessed with control. As the pressure mounted, the HOA began to crumble. Members started resigning, and Deb's authority was questioned. Finally, after weeks of turmoil, she was forced to step down as president. With Deb out of the picture, the HOA lost its teeth, the harassment stopped, and I was finally able to live in peace. I continued to maintain my blog, using it as a platform to advocate for HOA reform and to help other victims of abuse. In the end, I had won. I had stood up to the bullies, and I had defended my right to live in my own home, free from their petty rules and regulations. And as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over the rolling hills, I knew that I had made the right decision. The cottage was more than just a house. It was a symbol of my freedom, my independence, and my determination to live life on my own terms. And no HOA, no matter how powerful, could ever take that away from me.